Welcome back to just another solar podcast with Luke Beattie. That's me, Karl Jensen. G'day, Karl.
That's me. I've got the heater turned on again today, Luke.
The weather report, I love it, mate. And we're pushing towards summer too, Karl.
Could have fooled me. We've had one good day. That was Cup Day, so that everybody around Australia got to see how wonderful a place Melbourne can be. But it's just one day a year.
Yeah, it was beautiful during All Energy. It was sunny and warm. I don't know what you all whinge about.
We gave you a day at All Energy. The other day was rubbish, but we were inside, so you didn't see it.
Industry legend Nigel won't be joining us today. I did speak to him a short time ago. Those who follow the news and know that today there was an engine failure on a Qantas plane, had an emergency landing in Sydney, then there was a grass fire in the aftermath, and I believe Nigel was caught on the tarmac in a different aircraft for like 3 hours and needs to get back up home to the northern beaches. So Nigel sent his apologies, but we're joined by up-and-coming solar industry legend Jess MacPherson. G'day, Jess.
Wow, you're really gassing me up there, Luke. Thank you. And Karl, I've got the cooling on. It's warm here in Adelaide.
And Jess, we've missed you. We haven't seen you for a few episodes. What's been going on in your world?
I missed you guys too. It's just been busy here in Adelaide. We just got heaps of solar to install. So yeah, that's been keeping me real busy, but very glad to be back with you guys.
Jess, you're one of the few states that hasn't had a lot of problems with installing the new Powerwall yet.
Yeah, well, less than most, I would say. It's compatible with flexible export straight away. So that was a happy surprise that we weren't expecting, and yeah, has definitely made that a bit smoother for us.
And I suppose we should make mention of the big news, the US election. Donald Trump got up, and I know at least one person in our industry, Alan Kemp, aka Daniel, who ended up on SBS's The Feed as Australia's biggest Trump supporter. So I don't know if you guys saw that, but that was pretty entertaining and enlightening. And those who want to learn more can jump on his Facebook pages or the Solar Outsiders podcast. But good on you, Daniel. That was very entertaining. But for a lot of other people, we can make comment about the Trump's campaign or his upcoming presidency and global affairs. But really, when it comes to solar, I find it interesting because he's talking big on tariffs. It wouldn't be the first time that we've seen a Trump government impose tariffs on solar panels from China. So he's talking about 60% tariffs on goods and that sort of thing. What we saw last time, the flow-on effect was there were containers held up at the port, they were diverted to other markets, and frankly, I can't see the price of solar panels collapsing much more. So it'll be very interesting to watch that space.
Yeah, look, Luke, certainly Trump provided us with 4 years of entertainment during his last presidency. It seemed that every morning we got up to see a new shit show happening on TV of what Trump had said or done or whatever. I tried to distance myself from this. Ultimately, there's nothing I can do to change how the way Americans vote. And I hope that even with 60% tariffs, the cost of panels these days, if it's 60% tariffs, it's actually not a lot of money anymore. And I think that there's a great potential there for America to power on with renewables regardless of those tariffs. And if those tariffs make something viable for an American panel manufacturer, or even a Chinese manufacturer to set up manufacturing in America, then so be it. That's a good thing.
And we did see that last time when the Section 201, I think it was, tariffs were introduced. But let's watch that space. And I agree with you with the energy transition in the US. Even if they're going to drill and focus on fossil fuels, you can't turn back the transition to clean energy and storage. So it's going to be really interesting to watch. Speaking of storage, Karl, you've got some big news. What's going on at your house?
Got a battery, Luke. It's very exciting. 15 kilowatt hours. Live PO4 technology, 6 kilowatt 3-phase hybrid. I'm very close to putting in a side fence, and I'm very keen to build a solar fence, although I've still got to get that battle over the line with the other half. I think it's actually going to cost the same amount of money in materials, and I'm sure it will create quite the furore of people saying that it can't be done or whatever, but I'll give it my best shot. Solar fence.
I still remember your first home battery, Karl.
Yes,
Wasn't
indeed.
that a homemade battery in a IG30 casing.
That was awesome. That piece of kit. Secondhand 18650 laptop sells at $1 a pop on eBay. Couple of kilowatt hours, Enphase micro inverter and a time switch. Turn it on when peak time kicks in. Micro inverters start discharging the battery as hard as they can go. It was a great little rig.
Not compliant, but very, very smart.
No, the Enphase were good. They were compliant. They were the bit that was talking to the grid.
Very good. I have had a look at that do-it-yourself Powerwalls on Facebook. I mean, there's some very smart, intelligent people on that page, and there's some other people that you just hope they don't burn their house down.
Yeah, well, we had that guy turn up at the iStore stand saying that the GTI Hub hack was there for our inverters to attach a Tesla car battery, and away you go. So you buy a wrecked Model 3, salvage the battery out of it, bolt it to the wall of your house, and away you go, 60 kilowatt hours of storage.
So at this point, we're going to bring in the guest. Matt Harold is the director at Enviro Projects. And looking at LinkedIn, which I always do for the guests, that's like a mad scramble 5 minutes before we jump on. Matt, you've had the business for 17 years, so congrats on that, and thanks for coming on the podcast.
No, good on you, Luke. Thanks for having me, mate. I'm pretty stoked at having the opportunity to talk with you guys.
So you're based up there on the Sunshine Coast?
Yeah, the beautiful Sunshine Coast. Yeah, good part of the world.
Yeah, for sure, man. So 17 years ago, you started the business. How did that come about?
I've kind of always worked for myself since my mid-20s. Most of my working life before solar, I had a consultancy business in Sydney, and I was helping other companies with their sales and marketing. And to be quite honest, I was just jumping from project to project. I didn't really find anything that excited me, and I was having trouble to concentrate on anything for more than a month or so. I then had a good mate of mine, Brett Pearson, call me up. He owned a company called Eclipse Solar up on the Sunshine Coast. They had the distribution rights to distribute REC solar panels around Australia. He asked me if I could give them a hand with their sales, and next thing I knew, we were moving containers of REC panels all over the country. It was back in the old 50-cent feed-in tariff days, and I think from memory, the first container we sold were REC 200-watt panels, and they were $2.15 per watt. Very different days. I think, Luke, you started working there just after me. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. Yes, I worked, and shout out to Brett Pearson from Solar AU. He's a good mate of both of ours, and yeah, he's a legend. Yes, I started just after you. That's right. And I'd come from Energy Matters, Apollo Energy, and we were also an REC distributor at the time. But I do remember towards the end of my tenure at Solar Innovations, it was, or Aussie Express by that stage, we did an epic trip to Singapore for the F1 Grand Prix and took 30 clients. And Karl, you came along, and some of the other notable people came along. But if you ever want to do an REC factory tour in Singapore and coincide it with the Grand Prix, I highly recommend it.
Wow. That was one of the highlights of my life, Luke. I met Robertino Nurselim, who is a philanthropic billionaire, and he gave away at least $10,000 while we were sitting there having a cigar at a pub at 11 o'clock in the morning.
So, Matt, you were working for Brett at that point, selling RECs at greater than $2 a watt, which was the norm for premium panels back then. So where did you go from there?
Yeah, so the idea was come up to the Sunshine Coast for 3 months and give us a hand. That 3 months turned into 2 years, and mate, it was awesome working with Brett and his team. But after 2 years, I realised what a great opportunity the solar industry was, and I went and started up my own company, Australian Enviro Projects. Originally, it was set up to help small solar companies. I noticed while I was wholesaling with Eclipse Solar, there was a lot of small solar guys out there that were losing commercial solar systems to the bigger solar companies, and often those solar companies were interstate. So the idea of Australian Enviro Projects was to get in there and help them. You know, they were losing them because they were lacking in time and lacking in the potential to put really good proposals together. So my idea was to get in there and help them with the proposals and put in the time and effort and marketing so they could win some of the bigger solar jobs that they weren't winning on their own. And that worked really well. I'm still in touch with a lot of companies that I helped. You know, Luke, one thing I love about our industry, I don't know if you guys have noticed, but when you go to a party or a dinner or an event and you tell them you're in the solar game, everybody wants to talk to you. You know, everyone wants to talk to you about the solar on their roof or their power bill, or the guy that knocked on their door and tried to sell them a 5 kilowatt hour battery for 30 grand. Like, have you
Well,
guys
you get the ones that, hey, I really want to put a panel on my caravan. Can you help me out with that?
Yeah.
Oh,
So next thing I knew, I was installing solar for my friends, my family, my network of people, and I realised what a great opportunity that was. And Australian Enviro Projects became a solar retailer and has been ever since. Enviro Projects is far from a big company, and we've never really tried to be big. I keep it pretty small. I think the last few years we've installed about 3 meg a year, and that's made up of sort of 6 to 13 kilowatt systems for mums and dads. And the biggest system to date was a 500 kilowatt system I installed not long ago on the Sunshine Coast. You know, I sincerely love what I do every day. I love the people in our industry and have developed some really good friendships along the way, and I just can't wait for what's coming.
What are some of the biggest challenges you've had to face since you started the business?
I think the biggest challenge at the moment for a lot of solar companies, talking at All Energy a couple of weeks ago, I think it's also our biggest opportunity. You know, we've seen significant drops in feed-in tariffs. The power companies are shifting towards this time of use and demand charges. You know, there's this really need now to throw the idea of a battery into the mix. And that's a challenge. You know, we've been so used to selling solar and solar only with unbelievable return on investments. You know, with the help of the SDC rebate and these pretty good feed-in tariffs, you'd sell a solar system that should last 30 years with a 3 to 4 year return on investment. You know, mum and dad spends 10 grand on a 10 kilowatt solar system. They're going to save $3,000 a year. A business spends $100,000 on a 100 kilowatt solar system. They're going to save $30,000 a year. It's a really easy sell, but you know, as an industry, I don't think we can expect to just keep chucking solar panels on roofs. We really need to include the battery as a solution, and you know, really help solve this massive problem with the grid, that there's way too much solar circulating around in the middle of the day, and there's way too much demand on the grid as the sun goes down.
do you mind if
Yeah.
I ask, Matt, what's your attachment rate for battery look like?
Oh, inquiry rate from customers is 30%. So customers that we've installed in the last couple of years, attachment rate's probably around 10%.
Sunwizz's data says it's pushing towards 20% nationally now.
Yeah.
And I think it's a huge opportunity, and you've nailed it, that before we talk about battery rebates or, you know, how much consumers have to pay in ROIs, we need storage on the grid for the energy transition. That's a given. We're seeing all these commitments for massive batteries in the utility space, but the sleeping giant is behind the meter batteries for homes and small businesses. Do you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, I love selling the battery. I love, you know, I think to buy a battery, there's got to be more of a drive than just ROI. I love telling a mum or dad or a business, you know, like putting in a battery, it's a bit of an up yours to the grid. You know, it's a bit of the, I'll pay $1.20 a day to you guys, but I'll only use you when I'm really desperate for it. You know, and people love hearing that. It's also this, you know, you're the only one in the street that's going to have power when there's a blackout. And we all know that
They're keeping up with the Joneses, yeah.
well, we all know that there's more and more blackouts coming. And I've had a Powerwall for 18 months, 2 years, and I've had 2 blackouts, and I love my cricket. I love cricket. I'm obsessed with cricket. And both blackouts, I'm sitting there watching Australia play cricket. And, you know, I love telling customers, I'm sitting there and you get a little text on your phone saying, there's a blackout, you're now on battery. And I'm there like, how good's this? Lights are on.
And you have to turn it up a little bit. Turn it up a little bit just so the neighbours know that your TV's on as well.
But you hear people in the street. I heard them. How come Matt's still got lights on in his house? And they're like, "Oh, he's the solar guy," you know. And I love telling, like, it gets people, you know, passionate about spending that extra bit of money. And then there's just the feel good, the whole feel good thing. You're actually doing something that's really good. You're solving a problem. You're solving this. The grid's old, the grid's ancient, and now it's got this problem where there's all this solar running around in the middle of the day. We don't know what to do with it, and there's this huge demand at night time. And you're helping solving that problem by not giving them the solar when they don't need it, and actually not using power when they're desperate for you not to use it. So there's that kind of feel good thing that you're doing something good by everybody as well. And if you can touch on those other three things as well as your savings, it's just such a good journey. And people, I think, are more privy to spending that extra amount of money.
I was going to say $14,000 a megawatt hour last night in Queensland. Some kind of interconnector broken or whatever. And, out of kindness, I'm not with a retailer at the moment that does those spot prices, but out of kindness, I decided to discharge some energy from my battery. Made me feel good.
I think right now here in Queensland, I'm getting a $12.45 feed-in tariff with the Amber model on my little Tesla Powerball. So my aircon's just gone off. I'm sitting here in the boiling heat.
Discharge your battery, so we'll be in the dark later, but it's okay with me. $14.
So, Matt, really interesting there. So you've spoken about sticking it to the man as a driver for batteries, ROI, and energy security. Are there any others that are popping up? Like how can companies really speak to the whole host of people and the different drivers for battery sales?
It's a good question. I think keeping really good relationships with a good network of people. I've been lucky enough to work with a couple of builders and architects who we've nurtured and really looked after over the years, and they've been lucky enough to give us continuous work. Sticking it to the man is the thing that really gets my customers' attention, and the fact that, making them aware that prices of power are only going to go one way, and this big shift of making daytime power really cheap and nighttime power really expensive.
Yeah. So on that, Matt, I say to people, have a look at my rates. I get a free window 11 till 2, but 3 till 9, 66 cents, and off peaks 35. And people say, that's outrageous.
Yep.
And I said, well, it's funny. In WA, we had 50 cents a kilowatt hour peak and 25 cents a kilowatt hour off peak about 10 years ago. And everyone said, that's outrageous. So, of course, I look at people that I said to, reconsider batteries in a couple of years, 2 years ago. And, of course, people that got a battery anyway have actually already made some savings with their battery already, and therefore they are actually a little bit further ahead. They're a little bit further down the road than people that didn't get a battery yet. And of course, general inflation, wages, economic conditions in general mean that battery's not actually much, if any, cheaper than it was 2 years ago. So I've kind of flipped, and maybe the right time to get a battery is now, because even though one retailer might be expensive today, the rest of them are going to be more expensive tomorrow.
You know what, as well, if you look at your investment, we've sold a few larger batteries to businesses, and one of the big selling points for them was they've spent $100,000 on a battery. If they use 80% of that battery 5 days a week for the next 12 years, if you break down the cost per kilowatt hour for power, the cost is around somewhere, depending on what battery, there's around 22 to 25 cents per kilowatt hour. So if you can tell that business, yes, it's a big upfront payment, but you're buying your power at 25 cents for the next 12 years locked in, you're just buying it up front. And that's, that for a business owner, even for mum and dad, it's quite a good selling point.
I think the point you made earlier around sort of sticking it to the man and, screw your AGL, screw your origin, absolutely is a huge motivator. And I think people feel pretty it's pretty unfair that the retailer gets to sell your power to your neighbor at 10 times the markup, or whatever the ratio is, depending on your state and your plan and your whatever. And it's just kind of like, why should they be getting that? Yeah, I completely agree with you. People just want to get as isolated, as insulated from the whole system as they can.
I have to stick my hand up and say bigger is better. And I do notice that maybe it's me, but I see that people are getting 10 kilowatt hour batteries. It seems to be a nice round number, 10 or 13.5 or 15, around that number. That really does take care of most people's nighttime stuff, but it also means that you need a bigger solar system to go with it. And if that means that instead of people putting in 6.6s, they're putting 13.3s or 15s or 20s in so that they do have that capacity to charge their battery, that's easy cream on the cake for us. The guys are already there for a day with 3 blokes or 4 blokes. The extra 6 kilowatts that goes on the roof to do that isn't incrementally that significant in cost, but it's great margin for solar businesses to be putting in those larger size systems.
So I was chatting to the big man, Don McCurry, and he made a really interesting point around this with dynamic pricing. And he said at the moment it's quite lucrative where you can, you get these massive changes in the wholesale pricing and consumers can benefit from that. But it's quite plausible, it's quite likely that duck curve is going to minimise over time as we get more batteries on the grid. Each time they switch on a new utility battery, it reduces that. Each time we get, more batteries behind the meter, it reduces that. So as much as it can be quite lucrative now, it's also quite likely that duck curve is going to flatten out and there's going to be diminishing returns. Do you guys agree?
Well, yeah. Look, we had one pretty close to home just last week. Our iStore CEO had her internal combustion engine car catch fire. She's going to probably go out and buy an EV. And we hope that, of course, more of these internal combustion engine cars catch fire so that more people can go out and buy EVs. But the irony is pretty amazing, right? The CEO of iStore, not quite there yet, still got an old car and it catches fire. And
it's a fairly new car and it's a very nice car. Took it in for a service, got 50 metres down the road and it self-combusted. Ended up on the news, ended up on the Bell Tower Times. And like you said, Karl, a great motivation to get an EV. But no, that was a very new car and that was, there's a connection from the servicing and whatever they've done and a massive inferno.
I think you make a great point about the EV uptake and hopefully that, does flatten out our curve and help with our energy transition and all of those really important things. But I think even if it is less lucrative, it's still quite appealing. Like, I think about the average rates that we have quite a few customers on Amber as well. We pretty highly encourage it at NRG for anyone who's a bit more on the energy conscious appy kind of side of things. Yeah, the average rates that they'll buy in, at least 15, 20 cents less than the rate they'd be on a flat rate with any other retailer. So I think even if it does sort of the peaks and troughs start to shave off a bit, I think it's still quite an appealing option for a lot of people.
Yeah, look, I think that that game currently is won and lost in the software. And the software from Amber in particular, obviously they have price signals. Hey, you need to charge, you need to discharge, whatever that might look like. And of course, everybody's doing their best and AI is looking at it, all of that sort of stuff. But of course, if you discharge the battery right now and 20 minutes from now, it's an extra $5, then old mate's lost 10 cents and he's livid. So, the game is really interesting to see how that pans out over time, and is that another opportunity for software companies to get involved, and we see new software solutions that solve this problem.
Absolutely, the Amber models of the world are pretty dynamic, and it's certainly helped me put a lot of batteries in a lot of mums and dads' households.
Do you use Home Assist? You mentioned earlier your aircon is flicking on and off.
I do have Home Assistant, but no, it doesn't control my aircon.
Sure.
It's purely me turning it on and off here with
Still a bit manual.
The Amber rates just went up another $4, so it's going to be a hot old night. And there's cricket on tonight, so to be very aware of both of these things.
Look, I think it's a huge thing. So integration of all of our different products. So at the moment, I'm running the iStore heat pump Wi-Fi. I'm running the iStore Universe app for my battery. I'm running Fronius for my inverters. I'm running Charge HQ and Zappy for the 2 car chargers. And it's an absolute nightmare. I don't think that any normal person would tolerate it. And I look forward to seeing far more integrated solutions out there in the market, and I know that we're investing a lot in it, and other companies are investing a lot in it. But the software maturity that goes behind the hardware is great. Everybody, I'd say everyone in the industry thinks that all the hardware that they're using now is shitloads better than what it was 5 years ago. So we're really happy with the hardware, but the software integration, that the feedback that I'm getting from industry is that we've still got a long way to go.
I think that's really well said. In a perfect world, every customer's ready to go with the whole suite of products from day one. But quite often what we're seeing as well is that you have customers that have moved into a new place, like I have, and they might have a solar system that's perfectly good, and then they need the EV charger, and it ends up being a mosaic, or it ends up being a patchwork rather than a cohesive strategy to just stick with one solution. So I agree with you, Karl. Integration. I know Nigel isn't here, and I know Nigel would use that as his springboard to talk about catch. But speaking more broadly, I mean, just integration will be a huge thing.
Particularly in Victoria. So now we've got backstop. So even though they were going to grandfather historical systems, the reality is the network operators aren't allowing that. And we're seeing that right now with Tesla Powerwall. Basically, the requirements to connect to Powerwalls, you don't have any DC coupled or AC coupled, or you're zero export limited. There's a whole raft of problems with the various different network operators. And ultimately, I think that it's going to be very difficult to have multiple inverters on one site. And I don't think that's actually a bad thing. Since our last episode, 1st of November, all the people on the premium feed-in tariff in Victoria have lost it. And they've gone from, say, 60 or 65 or 66 cents, somewhere there, down to 3 cents for their exports. And obviously they're out there looking for batteries and other solutions, bigger systems. And unfortunately, the answer is that these old systems just really can't be integrated. And we're back having another episode with the recycling guys about recycling panels.
One of the other challenges I want to bring up, and one of the biggest news stories we've had in the industry in the last year, has been the collapse of emerging energy. It seemed to be a bit of a drawn-out thing. I think it was mid-last year where we saw emerging energy started paying a bit later. Now, this is all in the public domain now. We were dancing around it for many episodes where we discussed this and didn't name companies and so forth, but it's all in the public domain. They were paying later, and then they weren't paying, and there were lots of issues coming up online on the cutters pages and everything else. And then ultimately they went broke, and there was a few issues with associated companies. Now, there was an article in the ABC where I saw you, Matt. Yep. So Matt Harold, you were there talking about it. Anyone who's interested, you can just Google ABC Solar Matt Harold. It'll probably come up as the article, but it was really interesting to hear your take on it. So your company took a hit when emerging energy went down. Do you want to tell us about how that all went down from your point of view?
Yeah, absolutely. The debacle that was emerging energy. Look, in some ways, I'd probably blame myself for not being more on top of what was happening in my company. There were people, friends of mine in the industry, left, right, and centre, that were telling me emerging energy were dodgy and that they were going under. But I was getting paid every week or so. So I assumed that everything was okay. What I didn't realise was I was uploading 20 grand worth of SDCs 1 week, but they were only paying me $15,000 of that 20 grand worth of SDCs that I'd uploaded and traded with them. I just saw that every week I was getting paid something and didn't realise, being a small business and doing everything, my paperwork myself, I didn't realise that the debt was actually growing significantly month by month until it was too late. As soon as I stopped trading with them, their payments to me also stopped. So it's pretty black and white. I had my lawyer call them, and they told the lawyer that there was delays outside of their control brought about by the clean energy regulator, blah, 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 and that I would get paid. So then I stopped. I stopped trading with them, and I literally was getting calls from from their directors telling me that the only way I was going to get paid was if I kept trading deals with them. And the bigger deals
Sounds like a Ponzi scheme.
like the bigger the deals I traded, the more money I got paid. So I had a little bit of a dabble. I'd throw in a 20 kilowatt system and I'd get $5,000 worth of SDCs back. But it became pretty obvious pretty quickly that I was in a little bit of a pickle. Yeah, so it was hard. It was a lot of money that I lost. That I realized that it was just going nowhere, and that they were in big trouble.
It was interesting to see around the same time that Greenbot was suspended from trading certificates by the Clean Energy Regulator. This was also speculation, but it's in the ABC article that there had been common directors or former directors of Emerging were directors of Greenbot and so on. So it seemed that Emerging Energy went down, Greenbot were there. I know that Greenbot were listed on the creditors list for about $9 million too. So it was a big mess. But for you personally, for your business, I mean, for a small to medium business to lose the order of money you did, I mean, that's a massive hit, yeah?
Yeah, it's just stressful. It's stressful. And, one thing as a business person, I've always been really big on is paying the people I owe money first. The people, my wholesalers, they love me. They know I pay much before the money is usually owed. And the biggest upset for me is that I was going to let those people down. So yeah, I ended up having to take a small mortgage on my house to make sure my installers were paid and my suppliers were paid. And it's just you do the right thing in life and in business, and when you realise you're actually being lied to and really being let down, it actually really takes a personal beat on you. It was only September, I think, this year that the Clean Energy Regulator suspended Emerging Energy and from trading STCs. Like so many of us called them and asked for their help, and their only feedback was, "Hey, look, there's nothing we can do about it. Go and seek legal advice." And I know I've spoken to a few other people in my position, and we all felt fairly let down by them. And I would have thought there would have been something more that they could do earlier than what they did.
Yeah, indeed. I've met a couple of customers that have been, adversely affected isn't the right word. It's a huge amount of money, and everyone that's caught up in that, my heart goes out to them because, it's really hard to make money these days. Certainly, I've spent my whole career in the wholesale space. And people say, "Oh yeah, for a wholesaler, $100,000 to lose when someone goes broke is insignificant. You guys make 10% margins. You just got to sell another $1 million worth of stock." But what they forget is that our margins still cover our wages and our warehouses and all the other expenses. And it's not like we make 10% margin. We make 1% margin after all of those things. And it's not $1 million worth of stock that we've got to sell. It's $10 million worth of stock that we could have sell. And ultimately, for a lot of small wholesalers, $10 million is a hell of a lot of money to make up. And of course, insurance doesn't pay out enough to cover those debts, and the premiums are borderline extortionate, very expensive. And it's happened to the solar industry over and over again. We've just got to be so careful.
Yeah, plus your insurance goes up too, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. If you lose $100,000, there's no getting past it. The insurance company wants to claw it back over the next 3 or 5 years, so you pay for it in higher premiums.
Yeah.
What were the learnings you took away from it, Matt? Is there any revelation you got there after that experience that will change the way you do business?
First things first, listen to your peers more carefully, and just keep on top of your paperwork. Running a business, you got a responsibility to do your paperwork and dot your I's and cross your T's, and don't just focus on the prize. Make sure that you're doing all the little things in the background that keeps your business going. They're equally as important as winning a solar deal.
We've definitely seen a fair few bigger solar companies here in SA go under, and especially a few that have been around for a while. We're not talking your Phoenixing fly-by-nighters necessarily, Do we have any idea if like I don't know for sure if any of those are relating to emerging energy, but it's a hell of a coincidence, I guess, is what I'm saying.
Hard to say, isn't it? Because it's not always the one ingredient. But I don't know if it would have been a direct result of that, because really we've seen those sort of companies going under for the last 18 months to 2 years. I would say, and chatting to some of the old hands at All Energy, resoundingly everyone said it's been a very tough year, regardless, even the ones who are doing numbers. And one of the biggest things they all note is, yes, how tough the market has got, but also how much the margins have reduced. And that's all links in the chain. So
maybe the perfect storm.
It could be the perfect storm. I like to see the good guys win still, but it's been a tough slog. But things do seem to be picking up, and let's hope it's a strong end to the year.
Definitely going to be a strong end to the year, Luke. So, obviously pay attention to all the socials and so on and so forth. And people tell me this time of year, it's a race to see who's got the most installers and who's paying the most money. And installers, it took nearly 2 months for this installer of my solar system to have an availability for him to come back and kindly take away my cash money to install my battery. 2 months. It's 2 months. It's not like I'll be around there tomorrow to collect your folding. It was 2 months before he could get here. Ultimately, that tells me that we've got people leaving the industry, which always saddens me greatly. And they say that they can't tolerate the solar coaster and so on and so forth, but it must be pretty decent when things are decent like they are now. Suns has sort of come out and the industry seems to be pretty busy, and certainly All Energy, we saw mobs and mobs of people. So there's still a lot of interest in our industry.
Now, Matt, we don't have time for much more, so I just wanted to ask you, outside of business, you've been very busy doing different things in solar. What do you do to keep yourself on an even keel outside of business?
Mate, in July this year, I went and embarked on an amazing journey. Have you heard of Vipassana?
No, I haven't.
Vipassana is a 10-day silent meditation retreat. And you basically go to this amazing place in the Sunshine Coast in Pomona in the hills, and there's kangaroos and everything running around, and you go in there for 10 days and you're not allowed to talk, you're not allowed to smile, you're not allowed to
Karl, you'd have no chance, by the way. But anyway.
I was going to say, you're going to have to cut this part out of the episode because my missus is going to be booking me in.
I think and you meditate for 12 hours a day. It's not something that I'd recommend to many people, but it was game-changing for me. It just taught me so much about how to de-stress and spend time on yourself. And yeah, so that's been a big change in the second half of my life. And I love nothing more than getting out in the surf and getting on my surf ski and my surfboard and spending time down the beach.
Yeah, awesome, man. So how did you hear about that retreat?
Oh, I was at a conference 10 years ago and I met this person that just blew me away with his confidence and just the way he held himself. And I was like, man, there's something about you. And he said Vipassana, go and check it out. And it's something that I've been wanting to do for a hell of a long time. I recommend everyone just to have a look into it. It's free. It doesn't cost anything. You give back via donation, and I'm actually donating 25 kilowatts and a 30 kilowatt hour battery to them as my donation, which they're pretty stoked about. But yeah, it really taught a lot. It was one of the most challenging things I've ever done in my life, but it's really taught me a lot about myself and how to handle myself in some pretty tough situations. So highly recommended.
Yeah, right. So Angie's booking your flight, Karl, in the background there.
It's funny, Luke. So it was my partner Angie's 50th birthday, and obviously we've had electric cars for a long time now, so I thought it would be good to have a chat to one of our customers who's right into his fast twin turbo V8 Mercedes, and we did a drive day to make some noise. And making noise is lots of fun. It's just very expensive, which is great when it's somebody else's.
So before we wrap up, we'll just do a whip around to get any last comments, and we're going to start with you, Karl.
Backstop in Victoria has not been a smooth thing for the industry, and I feel the pain of everybody. We feel the pain. Big shout out to Rod Dewar. All the feedback is that the Fronius backstop method, where you put in your NMI and you nominate your retail or your network operator, is basically the only solution out there that works flawlessly, seamlessly, easily. Everybody else is a little bit clunky and needs some phone calls to their network operators. Don't leave the industry because of this. They're getting better at it every day, and ultimately just another low point in the solar coaster, and the high point's just around the corner.
Yeah, thanks, Karl. And Jess, last thoughts?
Oh, last thoughts is I'm galvanized. I'm excited. I agree with Karl. Like, the sun's coming out. It's the time of year just to go for that home stretch towards Christmas, and we're coming up to lots of great days for solar.
And finally, Matt Harold from Australian Enviro Projects. Thanks for coming on the podcast. Really appreciate it. What are your last thoughts?
Oh, you guys are legends. And look, I think 2025 is going to be an awesome year. I think everyone that's still in this industry and who have managed to keep a good reputation are here to stay. I think we all need to keep working hard, surround ourselves around good people. And something that I love doing when the market drops, like it does all the time, spend time looking back on things that you've done well and things that you can do better, and really nurture the positive relationships that you have with people who are important to you.
That's a good way to finish the week off. That's great advice. So thanks again, Matt, for coming on the podcast. Look forward to catching up soon.
Cheers, guys.
And thanks to you for listening. Please remember to subscribe, like our posts, engage with us anyhow so the interwebs can push us up in front of more people, and we'll catch you next time.